Mickey Cohen, the West Coast's notorious gangster. In the glitzy, glamorous world of old Hollywood, one figure cast a long, dark shadow from smoky casino back rooms to the front pages of every newspaper. Meyer Harris, Mickey Cohen. He wasn't just another mobster. He was a celebrity in his own right, a sartorial kingpin who hobnobbed with movie stars and duked it out with rivals, all the while cultivating an image as dazzling as the California sun. Cohen's life was a relentless whirlwind of high-stakes bets, brutal enforcers, and an endless dance with the law, making him the undisputed ruler of Los Angeles's underworld for decades. This is the story of the man who defined West Coast crime and reveled in the spotlight every step of the way, from Brooklyn brawler to Los Angeles enforcer. Born in Brooklyn, New York, in 1913, Mickey Cohen's early life was marked by poverty and a quick immersion into petty crime. His family moved to Los Angeles when he was a child, but it was in Cleveland, Ohio that Cohen first made a name for himself in the boxing ring. A talented, albeit short-tempered boxer, he fought professionally for a brief period, even crossing paths with future boxing legend Jack Dempsey. However, his true calling lay outside the ring in the burgeoning world of Prohibition-era organized crime. Cohen's pugilistic background and fearless demeanor quickly caught the attention of some of the era's most formidable mob figures. He became an associate of Louis Lepke Buchalter, head of Murder Incorporated, and in his younger years the infamous Al Capone in Chicago. Under these mentors, Cohen honed his skills in extortion, gambling, and intimidation, learning the brutal realities of the criminal underworld. His pivotal move came in the late 1930s when he returned to Los Angeles, becoming a protege of Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, the charismatic and violent mobster establishing the West Coast syndicate operations. Cohen served as Siegel's enforcer, muscle, and trusted lieutenant, playing a key role in Siegel's gambling and prostitution rackets. Their partnership was effective but volatile, culminating in Siegel's assassination in 1947, largely due to his disastrous mismanagement of the Flamingo Hotel in Las Vegas. The reign of the West Coast Capone. Siegel's death left a power vacuum in Los Angeles, and Mickey Cohen, with his ambition and ruthlessness, was quick to fill it. He swiftly consolidated control over Siegel's rackets and expanded into new ventures, including illegal gambling, prostitution, protection rackets, and even legitimate businesses used as fronts. Cohen's rise was not without fierce opposition. He survived numerous assassination attempts, often retaliating with brutal efficiency, further cementing his reputation as a formidable and dangerous figure. What set Cohen apart from many of his contemporaries was his flamboyant personality and his almost obsessive desire for public attention. Unlike other mob bosses who preferred to operate in the shadows, Cohen embraced the limelight. He dressed impeccably, often in custom-made suits, and frequented Hollywood hotspots, openly associating with movie stars, politicians, and prominent businessmen. His Brentwood home was a fortress, yet he often held court for reporters, offering colorful quotes and denying his criminal activities with a wink and a smile. This public persona, however, also made him a prime target for law enforcement, particularly the relentless efforts of Los Angeles Police Chief William Parker and government lawman J. Edgar Hoover. Cohen's legal troubles were constant, and he faced numerous charges throughout his career, ranging from assault, tax evasion, and even murder. It was ultimately taxes that proved to be his undoing and would land him in federal prison on 2 separate occasions. Cohen's inmate case file, a deeper look. This report, drafted entirely from Mickey Cohen and prison staff members' interview notes, provides a detailed background from his years at Alcatraz, Atlanta, and McNeil Island federal prisons. Prisoner name: Cohen, Meyer Harris, Alcatraz Register. Number 1518 report. Date: December 13th, 1962. This 49-year-old resident of Los Angeles, California, was sentenced on July 1st, 1961, to serve 15 years for attempting to evade and defeat income tax. He was committed directly to Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary on July 28, 1961, but released on appeal bond in October of the same year. He was returned to custody on May 8, 1962, returning to Alcatraz Island on May 14th. He is eligible for parole on January 18, 1967, and his mandatory release date is February 14, 1972. He receives 2 visits monthly from his brother, Harry Cohen, and his girlfriend, Claretta Hashagan of Las Vegas, who alternate their visits. He also had several visits from his attorneys and corresponds regularly with his brother, girlfriend, and sister, and occasionally with friends. He's been quite prolific in his letters, and has been warned several times about violations of correspondence regulations. He's held a clear conduct record since his return from appeal. He was assigned to the clothing room on May 24, 1962, where he remains. His work supervisor reports he is a very good worker, concerned about doing his share, and not riding on his name. In the cell house, he is cooperative and polite towards officers, keeps one of the neatest cells, and seems well-adjusted, though he has a tendency to be a pack rat. Cohen has made a good adjustment in the cell house, spending his time on various activities, with card-playing heading the list. He causes no trouble for other inmates and, while having an attitude that he deserves special consideration, he will obey the rules when confronted. Cohen is a member of the Jewish faith, and he attends services regularly. The Protestant chaplain remarks that Cohen has had some individual counseling, appears to be making a better adjustment, and is friendly and cooperative. He reads a great deal, evidenced by his extensive loans from the institution library, covering general works, sports, science, poetry, better speech and English, philosophy, travel, character, biographies, and biology. Notably, his book interests are strictly nonfiction. The prosecuting agency report notes that Cohen was convicted of attempting to evade federal income taxes for the years 1946, 1947, and 1948, and of giving a false statement to an agent of the United States Treasury Department by a federal jury on June 9, 1951. Similar charges against his wife were dismissed after the premature death of a highly important witness. The total amount baited by the couple, as proven at trial, was about $156,000. They were also found to have failed to pay some $5,000 in income taxes for 1945, though these figures were not the basis of any criminal charge. Official Bureau of Prisons Summary. Meyer Harris Cohen, known as Mickey Cohen, was born in New York City, New York, on September 4, 1913, to Max and Fanny Cohen, Russian Jewish immigrants from Kiev. His father operated a fish market until his death from tuberculosis in 1914. Cohen, who never knew his father, was told his mother worked tirelessly until old age prevented her. His sister described their parental home as very religious, with both parents strictly observing the Hebrew Sabbath. Mickey was not yet 2 years old when his father died. Pauline recalls the funeral taking place at home, with many friends attending the ceremonies. The 5 children, with Mickey being the youngest, were present. While he didn't speak much about his father's loss, he has always been sympathetic toward his mother, his knowledge of his father being entirely through what he was told. Cohen relates that his mother had to borrow money to move to California for her health after his father's death. Both his mother and older siblings experienced severe privation. He remembers his other siblings were better educated, a privilege he was denied, suggesting a feeling of being underprivileged in this regard. His mother worked after arriving in Los Angeles to alleviate dire financial circumstances. He stated that at a very early age he started to hustle papers for the now extinct Record, Express, and Examiner newspapers. His family home was kept immaculately clean, an example set by his mother. Both his wife and sister-in-law state that he is now fanatically clean about himself and his surroundings, likely impressed by this early training. Cohen states his next brother in age is about 11 years his senior. He remembers not playing or associating with any of his brothers during childhood, having to fight his own way, particularly with other newsboys in the Boyle Heights district. Explaining these years, he recalls, "If you came from Los Angeles, you know Boyle Heights." During these years, Mrs. Cohen, through savings held by the older boys, bought a small grocery store and later a restaurant, working 14 and 15 hours a day. Cohen states he quit school to work and assist his mother. Through a newsboys group, he became interested in boxing early on. He cannot remember how this activity was first directed, but recalls taking part in newsboy exhibitions at a very early age. Developing this interest, he relates that he became more active in newsboy boxing cards, which supplemented his earnings. Around the time he quit school, the other children had left home, and he continued to sell newspapers on the corner of Soto and Brooklyn Avenues. From then until about age 14, he made a name for himself in boxing activities in the Newsboys Association in Los Angeles, recalling with pride that he often made as much as $20 a fight, often being placed on cards held at bootlegging clubs. Cohen states he went to Cleveland through the Newsboys Association, where he continued boxing. His sister-in-law relates that she and her husband started him out when he first came to Cleveland and tried hard to help him. His older brother was a fight promoter there at the time. While Cohen did not relate to the situation, he has mentioned working in his brother's drugstore and points out that he first boxed as an amateur and later turned professional. Much of his time was spent hanging around gymnasiums, frequented by workout pugs and gamblers. While initially financially successful, the advent of the Great Depression soon left him at his wits' end, as he could barely make a living. At that time, possessing no education and lacking skills other than boxing, his activities became more directed toward gambling, a field he states nearly every pug takes up when done with boxing. He relates that he became identified with a group of other similarly circumstanced boxers who really didn't know where their next meal was coming from. While boxing, it is reported that he became an advent for newspaper publicity. This personality trait seems to have remained with him. During this time, he also gave money to his mother for her support. At this writing, it is not yet known whether other family relations were close or what part his brother may have played in his activities. Cohen relates that his first difficulty with the law occurred in the company of some other unemployed boxers with whom he associated. Recounting the incident to the U.S. probation officer, Cohen stated that he had formed the habit of hanging around a certain restaurant where occasionally the manager would rip up a small meal ticket for them. A scheme was developed where the manager would turn over the contents of the till to them, claiming he had been robbed. Carrying through with the plan, he was caught and made a full confession. Cohen was placed on 2 years probation for his part, subsequently made restitution for about $140. Going to Chicago, Cohen relates that he continued his gambling activities and became further identified with the underworld. His appearance on the Los Angeles scene took place in 1939. The prosecuting agency reports that he has been the focal point of numerous police investigations. The most recurrent offenses appear to be brutal assaults on people who did not agree with his business methods. Public expenditures of funds in investigating and prosecuting Cohen over 13 years totaled several $100,000. Cohen was again arrested by the Los Angeles Police Department in February 1941 for bookmaking, and on July 11th was convicted, receiving a 6-month sentence, serving his time at the Los Angeles County Honor Farm. Following his release, he was again arrested in September of 1941 and held for questioning in connection with the attempted murder of Benny Gamson while under appeal bond on the former offense. In July 1942, he was arrested by Los Angeles police for cutting the telephone wires of a racing operation and was accused of beating the owner of the business. The next month, he was arrested by police for shooting craps and fined $5. Arrested by San Francisco police in September 1944 and charged with vagrancy, he was permitted to forfeit bail and leave town. In May 1945, he was arrested in Los Angeles for shooting and killing a competitive bookie in a bookie joint owned by Cohen. He admitted the shooting and, though there were no direct witnesses, alleged he acted in self-defense. A complaint was refused by the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office. His gun was returned, and he was released. He has since bragged to fellow inmates that it cost him $40,000 to escape this charge of murder. In November of the same year, he was arrested by Los Angeles police on a charge of robbery at a gambling place he owned. The complaint was refused by the Los Angeles County District Attorney, and he was released on November 19th. He was again arrested by Los Angeles police in January of 1946 on a bookmaking charge. The case was dismissed on February 6th. Cohen, in May 1946, was one of the suspects questioned and released in the unsolved homicide of Paul Gibbons, a bookie competitor and hoodlum. The investigation by the Beverly Hills Police Department notes that it was rumored at the time that Gibbons was the person who had broken into Cohen's home on June 16, 1944. At the time, there was underworld conversation that Cohen had obtained the services of Benny, Meatball Gamson, and George Levinson, 2 known criminal characters, to do away with Gibbons. Gamson's car was placed at the scene of the crime, and he was arrested in a complaint asked for from the district attorney's office, which was refused, and he was released. Levinson, also taken into custody, obtained an attorney to represent him. But the police were unable to interview him for 2 days after the killing, and then only in the presence of his attorney. Cohen was interrogated and volunteered information that Gibbons was a stool pigeon for law enforcement officers and had double-crossed several members of the underworld. Cohen states that Gibbons was a welcher and was an employee of the Shannon brothers, also known as a shaman, whom Cohen had killed the preceding year. With Gibbons' elimination, Gamson and Levinson acquired a reputation among the underworld as killers, and it was reported that they had been given the assignment to eliminate Cohen by rival gamblers. Cohen found out they had an apartment at a Los Angeles address. On October 3, 1946, both Gamson and Levinson were killed there. It was general conversation among the underworld that Cohen had these gunmen murdered. The Beverly Hills police kept him under constant surveillance, questioning him and his guests at frequent intervals as he returned home early in the mornings until he finally moved to West Los Angeles. In June 1947, Cohen was one of the suspects questioned and released in the unsolved homicide of Benjamin Bugsy Siegel, and afterward took over part of Siegel's interests. He was again questioned in August 1948 as one of the suspects, and was released in the unsolved homicide of his bodyguard, Harry "Hooky" Rothman, and the wounding of 2 members of Cohen's gang, Albert Snyder and James Risk, in Cohen's place of business. Rothman had been on the downgrade through the use of drugs for several years prior to the shooting, and Cohen had come to distrust him. He had administered a severe beating to Rothman for throwing his weight around at the Del Mar racetrack. After the shooting, Snyder left town and was last reported in Pittsburgh. In March of 1949, Cohen and several of his gang were charged with conspiracy, assault with a deadly weapon, and obstructing justice in the beating of Mr. Pearson. He was acquitted after a trial on March 7, 1950. On July 20, 1949, Nettie Herbert was shot in front of a restaurant on the Sunset Strip, dying 6 days later. Cohen was wounded in the shoulder, and in all probability was the prime target. Harry Cooper, an investigator for the Attorney General's office, and actress Dee David were also wounded. Herbert had taken over Hooky Rothman's job with Cohen after Rothman's killing. A prior attempt had been made on his life at his home on June 22nd. The common opinion was that Cohen was behind the shooting in an endeavor to teach Herbert a lesson, Herbert having hidden Collins' bullet-ridden car in his garage while the investigation was being conducted by the police. Information about the hiding of the car leaked out approximately 2 weeks after the investigation started. Early in August 1949, David Ogle and Frank Nicolay, 2 of Cohen's henchmen, disappeared. They were under indictment with Cohen for assaulting a local businessman who had bookmaking connections. Ogle and Nicolay's testimony probably would have made the case against Cohen and the other defendants. Cohen was acquitted after the disappearance. At the time of this incident, he was trying to smear the police department in a political maneuver by involving them in the case, the attempt being unsuccessful. Cohen's attorney, Samuel Rummel, was killed with a shotgun in front of his home in Los Angeles on December 11, 1950. He had been Cohen's attorney for many years, but it was known that they had been in disagreement for several months prior to the killing. Cohen's home on Marino Drive in Los Angeles was bombed on February 6, 1950, indicative of the violence surrounding his activities. Residents in the vicinity petitioned the city council to have Cohen evicted for public safety reasons. The Los Angeles police reports that Cohen's life story was run in serial form by the Los Angeles Daily News in 1949, indicating the great public interest in his case. His connection with organized crime has been apparent for many years. His contacts, and quite possibly his superiors, in the underworld include Frank Costello in New York, Anthony Milano in Akron, a member of the Mafia, Jack Dragna of Los Angeles, Mafia chief of the West Coast, and many others of similar background. The list of his gang members, at least some of the members, has been furnished to the institution by the prosecuting agency. According to the prosecuting agency, he has handled betting transactions with many of the biggest betting commissioners in all parts of the states, but acquired a reputation as a welcher. His clothing store in Los Angeles operated as a blind front for his activities, featured a bulletproof steel door, a bulletproof sedan, and nominal actual sales. Despite his record of professional gangsterism and intimate association with repeated acts of violence, Cohen has a reputation for aiding needy persons and causes, and for generosity toward his friends and relatives. Similar to creating a persona of Al Capone, he is obsessed with a craving for publicity and fine living, indicated by his announcement immediately after he was sentenced for income tax evasion, that he planned to write a story of his life as the subject of a motion picture. He has received encouraging letters from his family. A small amount of fan mail has also been received, which has been returned due to their eccentric nature. Cohen states that he is fearful due to the attempts on his life and will endeavor to keep himself in the background while here. He states that he has had some difficulty in warding off the attention of others while trying to avoid offending. Alcatraz. In the footsteps of Capone. Mickey Cohen's reign as the West Coast Al Capone began to wane in the late 1950s and early 1960s. In May of 1957, Cohen engaged in an interview with respected journalist Mike Wallace. During his interview, he explained that he was a changed man, but he never apologized for his criminal past and showed no remorse for past violence. In the explosive interview, Cohen stated the following: Mike Wallace, you have made book, you have bootlegged. Most important of all, you've broken one of the commandments. You've killed Mickey. How can you be proud of not dealing in prostitution and narcotics when you've killed at least one man, or how many more? Cohen: well? Wallace: how many more, Mickey? Cohen: I have killed no men that in the first place didn't deserve killing. Wallace: by whose standards? Cohen: by the standards of our way of life. And I actually, in all of these killings, in all of these, what you would call killings, I had no alternative. It was either my life or their life. Well, to be a bit truthful with you, I was accused of maybe more than one, but that would be the same answer on any one of them. Every one of them was a matter of either being my life or their life. You couldn't call them murders, or you couldn't call them cold-blooded killings. It was a matter that if you were sitting there with a gun in your desk, or wherever, and when you tried to talk diplomatically to the persons, and it would reach the point where you seen it was your life or theirs, naturally you're going to make a try. Try to save your own life. Despite his cunning and connections, pressure from federal authorities mounted. In 1961, he was convicted of tax evasion and sentenced to 15 years at the federal penitentiary, Alcatraz Island, where he famously lived in the same cell block that Al Capone once lived. His time in prison was marked by further violence, including an attack by another inmate that left him partially paralyzed. Alcatraz. The very name conjures images of unyielding stone, icy currents, and America's most dangerous men stripped of their power. For most, it was a profound humbling. For Mickey Cohen, Hollywood's most flamboyant gangster, it was a slow, agonizing suffocation, not of his body, but of his carefully constructed persona. Forget the cinematic portrayals of Cohen as a Hollywood kingpin, even behind bars. On the Rock, the dapper Don found his wardrobe reduced to itchy wool, his endless stream of celebrity calls replaced by the clanging of cell doors, and his meticulously coiffed hair perpetually disheveled. Alcatraz didn't break Mickey Cohen's spirit in a dramatic Hollywood fashion. Instead, it systematically dismantled the stage on which he had built his life, leaving him for the first time with nothing but himself. He first arrived on Alcatraz in 1957. Convicted of tax evasion, Cohen, who once boasted of sharing drinks and laughs with Frank Sinatra, was now isolated and alone, confined within the same cold, dreary cement walls that Al Capone once lived. The immediate shock, however, wasn't the loss of luxury, but the loss of leverage. On the streets of Los Angeles, Cohen was a man of connections, favors, and fear. On Alcatraz, he was just another number, a cog in a meticulously dehumanizing machine. One of the most striking aspects of Cohen's time on Alcatraz was the profound silence that replaced his constant chatter. The man who thrived on gossip, on whispered deals and boisterous boasts, found himself in a world where conversation was a luxury, and genuine connection a dangerous liability. Former prisoners like Al Capone had their own forms of internal power structures, but Cohen, arriving later and with a different reputation, never truly integrated into any established pecking order. He was a curious anomaly, a notorious figure, yet strangely isolated. His obsession with appearances, so vital to his identity on the outside, became a poignant, almost tragic footnote. While other inmates might have fantasized about escape or revenge, Cohen reportedly spent an inordinate amount of time on the minutiae of his allowed personal items: the perfectly folded handkerchief, the meticulously shined, government-issued shoes. These weren't acts of defiance, but rather the desperate clinging to the last vestiges of the Mickey Cohen he knew, a ghost of his former self haunting the gray corridors. Beyond the obvious deprivations, Cohen's time on Alcatraz was a subtle, internal chess match. His opponent wasn't another inmate or a guard, but boredom itself. The man who juggled multiple rackets, social engagements, and legal battles was now faced with an almost absolute absence of external stimuli. How did a mind so accustomed to constant stimulation adapt? Accounts suggest he became an avid reader, devouring books with surprising intensity. Was it genuine intellectual curiosity, or simply a desperate attempt to fill the void, to exercise a mind that refused to atrophy? The infamous prisoner shared time alongside other famous convicts, including Bumpy Johnson, Frankie Carbo, and then bank robber Whitey Bulger. In fact, Bulger remembered seeing Cohen and Johnson greet each other. Mickey would greet Johnson with a causal, "Hey, Bumps," and Johnson would return with, "Hi, Mike." But beneath the surface of these casual interactions, also highlighted, was his vulnerability. On Alcatraz, his protection wasn't his street muscle, but the fleeting, often arbitrary attention of the guards. Mickey Cohen left Alcatraz not with a triumphant roar, but with a whimper. The rock had not broken him physically, in a dramatic sense, but it had chipped away at the very foundation of his identity. His Alcatraz years weren't a period of grand schemes or daring escapes. They were, instead, a quiet, almost domestic tragedy for a man who defined himself by his public image. In the end, Alcatraz didn't just contain Mickey Cohen. It meticulously deconstructed him, leaving behind a ghost of the celebrity gangster, trapped not just by bars, but by the echoes of an empty suit. Cohen was a remarkably model prisoner during his time at Alcatraz. He maintained a quiet demeanor and secured a coveted job in the prison's clothing room, a position previously held by infamous figures like Al Capone, John Anglin, and Whitey Bulger. Cohen himself highlighted the unexpected perk of this assignment in his 1975 memoir, stating, "This Alcatraz is unbelievable in the United States of America. I was in charge of the clothing room, which gave me access to take a shower twice or 3 times a day, or at least once a day for sure, which was the thing that saved my life." Whitey Bulger, who served alongside Cohen, recalled their interactions as mostly distant. He observed Cohen occasionally speaking with Frankie Carbo, but only casual talk. Carbo, a known enforcer for New York City's Murder Incorporated and the Lucchese family, arrived at Alcatraz in 1962 and was housed in the same cell block as Cohen for a period. Interestingly, Carbo was rumored to have orchestrated the 1947 murder of Bugsy Siegel, one of Cohen's closest associates. Cohen also enjoyed a perk that had not been afforded to men like Al Capone in the early years of Alcatraz. During the Capone era, only legal family or wives were allowed to visit prisoners, but Alcatraz was now the spirit of a different era. Cohen's girlfriend, Sandy Hagen, was permitted by the warden to visit. The press often photographed her journey from Las Vegas to San Francisco as she boarded and disembarked the ferry, eager for any news of how Cohen was handling his time on the Rock. Sandy would comment how bleak the cement cell block looked behind him, and she sat at the visitor's window seeing Mickey in a proud but defeated state. Cohen spent most of his Alcatraz sentence in cell B226 on the second tier of B block. He was in this very cell during the famous 1962 escape attempt by Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers, which occurred along the same corridor. He would have a front row seat to watch the escape unfold, and the frantic correctional officers discovering the prisoners missing from their cells that morning in July of 1962. Cohen also worked directly with John Anglin in the clothing room. Whitey Bulger noted Cohen's comfort in this role, describing him as serious, but consistently respectful to everyone he encountered. He would comment that he later learned a lot from Cohen in watching these interactions. Cohen's time at Alcatraz ended in January 1963, when he was transferred to Atlanta, just a few months before the island prison closed. However, his troubles were far from over. On August 14, 1963, a fellow Atlanta inmate and former Alcatraz acquaintance, Burl McDonald, launched a brutal attack. McDonald, after escaping a secure area, entered an electronics repair facility, grabbed a 3-foot iron pipe, and bludgeoned an unsuspecting Cohen from behind, rendering him unconscious. The attack left Cohen with a critical head injury. He underwent extensive neurosurgery to remove skull fragments from his brain tissue. After a 2-week coma, doctors inserted a steel plate to replace the damaged bone in the back of his skull. Later, during a telephone interview with Alcatraz historian Michael Esslinger, Whitey Bulger commented on the brutal attack.
Brings back a lot of memories looking at these old photos of. Regarding your questions about Cohen, later when Mickey Cohen transferred out to Atlanta, Burl McDonald, who served time with us on Alcatraz, came up behind him and struck him down. McDonald was a lowlife, a real zero who had to be jealous of Mickey. There were only 2 occasions I can remember talking to McDonald. Both times I told him what I thought of him. I don't recall ever seeing him in Leavenworth or Lewisburg. A real punk. I pictured him heavier back then, much heavier than he looks in his Alcatraz photo. McDonald worked in the kitchen, and most of them had strange hours. They hung around the mess hall talking over food and coffee, which was their payoff for their work. Mickey was old by the time he was finishing out his sentence, and I doubt he ever saw it coming.
Cohen was released from Atlanta on January 6, 1972, and returned to Hollywood. While he survived the assault, he was unfortunately misdiagnosed with an ulcer, which was later discovered to be stomach cancer. The attack left him completely disabled for the rest of his life, and he spent his final years in solitude. Mickey Cohen passed away peacefully in his sleep in a luxurious Los Angeles apartment in 1976 at the age of 62. If you're interested in learning more about Whitey Bulger's memories of Cohen at Alcatraz, consider Michael Esslinger's book, James Whitey Bulger, The Last Interviews. This book, based on 7 years of interviews with Bulger, chronicles his time on Alcatraz and his years as an FBI fugitive, and is widely available from reputable booksellers. Also, if you've enjoyed this Alcatraz prisoner profile, please subscribe to our channel for future releases.